Not because I'm hypocritical, but because it's not the appropriate time. So the nature of Abu Dhar, may Allah have mercy and may Allah honor him, because he was one of the true companions of our Prophet and Imam Ali alayhi salam after our Prophet. Abu Dhar's nature was to see what is right and to say what is right without regard to the social consequences. And for him, it was no concern that it might cause harm to him. It was no concern that it might cause a disagreement in society. He was willing to pay those costs himself, and he was willing to cut off a friendship if it was because of principle. This was both a good attribute of Abu Dhar and also a potentially dangerous attribute, because Imam Ali alayhi salam needed followers who were committed to the truth, but he also needed followers who would be able to understand when is the right time to say something and when is not. Just to give you an example of what I'm saying, Abu Dhar was one of the first people to accept Islam in Mecca. When the rumors that there is somebody who claims to be a messenger from God first started to spread out of Mecca and be heard in the Hijaz. And so Abu Dhar, there's a story, but eventually he came himself in person to Mecca, and he met the Prophet, and he accepted Islam. Very pure person, very simple person. He didn't have to tell the Prophet, let me think about it, let me consult with somebody. He saw the truth, and because of that purity of his heart, he accepted it. One of the first people to accept it. You would think people who knew the Prophet closer, had lived with him, had experienced his good attributes, they would have an easier time. But they had to think about it. And many of them did not accept Islam until much later. But Abu Dhar, his first meeting with the Prophet, he accepted Islam. The Prophet said, keep it to yourself. Quraysh are going to be very unhappy if they hear that somebody from the tribe of Ghifar, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, his tribe was Ghifar, they lived at a distance from Mecca, and when a person from Ghifar accepts Islam, that means that Islam is starting to spread. So Quraysh is going to be afraid that now we are losing control. We're losing that battle of people's thinking. It's going to be a very big danger for them, not because Abu Dhar was a king, but because they didn't want Islam to spread outside of Mecca. They were afraid of it spreading even in Mecca. And so Abu Dhar had just accepted that the Prophet is a prophet. But he came out and he couldn't contain himself, and he testified that this is the truth, and he had accepted the truth. And he was beaten by Quraysh until the uncle of the Prophet, Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, came and said, what are you doing? This is a person whose tribe, Ghifar, was known for being a very martial tribe, because they didn't live in the city. They lived in the desert. And people who live in the desert, they have just themselves for protection. People who live in the city, they spend their time in other kinds of activities. But people who live in the harsher environment, whether it be thieves, whether it be enemy tribes, whether it be wild animals, whether it be the changes of the weather, they always have to be ready to defend themselves, even when they are asleep. So, if Quraysh is going to harm somebody from Ghifar, then Ghifar is going to be their enemy. And he brought some reasonableness or some sense to the people of Quraysh who had attacked Abu Dhar. This was the nature of Abu Dhar. He didn't see that the Prophet told me not to speak because of my own protection. Now, in case there is a question, why would Abu Dhar disobey the Prophet? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi had given him that advice for his own protection. And so he, as a new Muslim, as somebody who was so overcome with the truth of the message, he was not able to contain it. It wasn't disobedience of the Prophet, but rather the excitement that he overlooked his own protection and safety. And the story continues, but this tells us a little bit about the personality of Abu Dhar. So Abu Dhar, because he was so committed to the truth that he was even willing to make enemies for the sake of the truth, there are certain ahadith that we find that our Prophet gave him teachings in akhlaq. And there are a number of wasaya, a number of statements that our Prophet gave to refine the akhlaq of Abu Dhar. Some of you may have heard ahadith, because this is not our topic, but Abu Dhar was one of our important companions, so I will add one more point. Some of you may have heard that there are a number of ahadith narrated that kind of cast doubt on Abu Dhar among the general companions. And this is something which is because of his love for Ahlul Bayt, that false ahadith were ascribed that he was rough, that he was kind of not always careful about what he said. And you will find that those companions who were close to Ahlul Bayt, they are the only companions that you will find a critique of in the general ahadith circulated. There are many companions who got drunk after they accepted Islam, but before the public banning of alcohol. There are many companions who would be lazy in coming to the congregation. Surah Al-Jum'ah tells us that there were companions who would abandon the Prophet when he is giving a khutbah and go and look at commotion in the streets or in the markets. But those names are generally not preserved for us because they were not close to Ahlul Bayt. Those who are close to Ahlul Bayt, if there is anything that might kind of cast doubt on them, like Abu Dhar alayhi salam, then you will find somebody has tried to convey that hadith. This is not the truth of his character, but it shows the connection he had to Ahlul Bayt, that people would try to narrate slight criticisms. I won't mention those ahadith, but just so you are aware, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam guided Abu Dhar not because there was a weakness in his character, but because he was so pure and so simple that he was ready to accept those teachings of the Prophet. It is not a sign of deficiency, but rather a sign of his greatness. The hadith is, Ya Abu Dhar, iyaka wa hijrana akhik. O Abu Dhar, don't ever abandon your brother. Meaning your fellow believer, don't ever turn your back on your believer. فَإِنَّ الْعَمَلَ لَا يُتَقَبَّلُ مَعَ الْهِجْرَانِ. A good deed that you may do cannot be accepted by Allah if you have rancor, if you have a grudge against a fellow believer. So always remember that it is important for us to maintain our relationships with each other, not just for social reasons, not just for peace of mind, but because it affects whether our worship is going to be accepted as well. Related to this, we have a teaching that tells us that there are certain times when it is permissible and it is actually even good to stretch the truth. First, I will read the hadith and then I will give a brief explanation. This is a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Imam Ali alayhi salam. The Prophet said, Ya Ali, thalathun yahsunu fihinna al-kadhib. There are 3 areas where it is good. The word in the hadith is kadhib, to tell a falsehood. But in reality, it isn't a falsehood, it is a stretching of the truth that is being referred to. And for us to understand that, we have to understand that the way something is described depends on who we are referring to. So if there is somebody who is known for not caring about their character, and I say that that person did something bad, and the first thing that will come to your mind is that they committed a grave crime. Because you know that for them just to miss a prayer, for them to be caught doing something haram is not unusual. They don't care about those small things anyway. But then if there's somebody who is known for being very, very pious, very upright in their character, and you say, I caught them doing a bad thing. It might simply be, for example, that normally they are very dignified, and then you caught them, they got some fast food, and they were walking in the street, and they were eating. It's not something that you would expect a very respectable and a very dignified and a very pious person to do, so it becomes a big deal. So when Prophet Muhammad is referring to Imam Ali alayhi salam and speaking to him, then remember the standard of truth that our Prophet had and Imam Ali had is a very high standard. Not only do you not tell a lie, but you don't even imply a lie. You don't even say something that might kind of be a little bit of a slight falsehood. That is a very strict standard. So when the Prophet said there are 3 times when it is good, he doesn't mean kadhib in the sense of a blatant lie, an outright lie. But rather what he is referring to is that there are 3 times when you shouldn't maintain that standard of truth. And this is described in books of law, that if you are able to accomplish the purposes that I'm going to describe with tawriya, then you do tawriya. Tawriya literally in Arabic means to cover something up. So you say something that is not a lie, but it's adjacent to a lie. And the point is to accomplish a valid religious goal, to avoid something that is harmful or undesirable without having lied. And if it's not possible to do that, then in certain cases it is permissible to lie. So the minimum amount of departure from a strict standard of truth that accomplishes an important religious goal. What are those important religious goals? A few of them are mentioned in this hadith. The Prophet says, al-makidatu fil harb. Number 1 is if there is a battle and you have to fight a battle, then you don't have to tell the strict truth. Because then basically you're telling your enemy exactly what they need to know to attack you. That's going to cause loss of life. It's going to cause injury. It might cause people to lose their homes and their property and their livelihood and so much harm. So for the enemy, and to keep them off balance, you might say, for example, that we are heading in one direction when you intend to head in a different direction. It is said that in the battle of Siffin, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he used that technique. For example, he would say, today I am going to kill Muawiyah, inshallah. And people asked Imam Ali that, why did you do that? He said that everybody knows my standard of honesty. When I say something, then people know that I don't just talk for the sake of talk. I am not a talker. So when I say that, then this itself is going to bring victory closer to our army. It's going to save the enemy's life and it's going to save our lives because they are going to flee. But of course, Imam Ali, he would never say a falsehood, so he said, Insha'Allah, so that it would be clear that this is not a falsehood. But he lowered his voice just a little bit. So this is al-makidatu fil harb. And we can see that there is a clear benefit to life and livelihood in that kind of a statement. There are examples from the lifetime of our Prophet and our Imams as well. As our ulama have pointed out with this example and other examples, even if what you say is not an actual true statement, it is not a lie because you are not informing about something. A lie, for example, is if I say it is night right now when it is day. That is a lie. But if I say that I am going to do something and I am not really going to do it in the way that I say, that is not information, that is a promise. And it cannot be a lie or it cannot be true because it is not describing something. There is no truth. There is only an implicit lie. What is the implicit lie? If I intend not to do it. When I say I am going to do this, then implicitly I am saying that I honestly have that intention. And the lie is if what I say does not reflect my intention. But I didn't say I intend. I said I am going to do. That is not going to be a lie regardless of whether I do it or not. Is that clear? The lie is only implicitly, what do I intend? So when a person promises something, if there is a reason to make that promise, even if they're not sure if they're going to be able to do it, then it's not a lie. Let me give you an example of this that all of us use in our lives. Something is going on that is very scary, and you don't know what's the result going to be. Your child says, "Are we going to be okay?" There's a flood, God forbid. You're caught in a very dangerous situation. You don't know if you're going to be okay or not. God forbid a loved one is in the hospital, and you don't know if the operation is going to be successful or not, especially if it's something risky. So what should you say to your 12-year-old or even to your adult relative? Well, you know, there's a 60% chance that we're going to make it out. If you say there's a 60% chance, that right there is going to reduce the possibility that they are going to come out of that trial successful, because they will lose their confidence and their hope. What do you say? Everything will be all right. Does that actually reflect what you think? No. But does that accurately reflect what you hope and what you pray for? Yes. It's not a lie. Don't have any second thoughts. Don't think that if you tell them the actual percentage that you are being more honest. You are not being more honest. You are just making it more difficult for them to be able to get a desirable outcome. So this is what I'm referring to. You're not describing something for it to be a lie. You're promising something, or you're praying for something. Now, if you understand this explanation, hopefully we won't have trouble with the second example, because the second example that the Prophet says, وَعِدَتُكَ زَوْجَتَكَ, when you promise something to your wife, or you promise something to your spouse. So this is again the same principle. You promise something based on what you hope and based on what you pray for, but you don't have to be entirely strict in terms of the probability that something will work out or won't work out. This is one of the ways that you remove worry and hope. Now, of course, the Prophet is speaking to Imam Ali, so he says that when you say something to your wife, but this is a general principle. It can apply to relatives, it can apply to friends, that when I make a promise to somebody, then there is a greater principle than just what is the actual likelihood of something working out. You don't want to be undependable. You don't want to say to your spouse that I'm going to bring home these groceries and then not do it and say I just made a promise to make you feel better. Try it and you'll see that that doesn't actually bring any benefit. Similarly to your friends, you don't want to promise I'll be there Saturday to help you with something and then say that I just made a promise to feel so you feel better, and they're there waiting for your help and you don't show up. That's not what is being referred to. But when there is something that is concerning somebody, when there is something that is worrying somebody, It's not a matter of being dependable or honest, but rather an emotional need that a person has. So you promise that, yes, inshallah, we'll take care of this. Yes, I'll do this. That could happen with a spouse, it could happen with others. It's more common, though, when you have a close relationship, an intimate relationship with a family member. Make that promise and hope, inshallah, that you will be able to take care of it. But you don't have to come and say, well, you asked if we will be able to take care of this, so let me tell you my entire budget, let me tell you all of the possibilities. That's not going to provide confidence and hope in the other person. So one is in battle, one is when you are promising something to your spouse, wal-islahu bayna an-nas, and when you are trying to bring people together. And again, you don't have to be strictly honest, but try to say those things that can make people forget their anger and their animosity. Once again, you have to be wise. Because if you're trying to bring people together and I just make something up, if you are fighting with somebody and I come to you and say that person you're fighting with, they were praising you. They miss you. They love you. Right? And then you believe me. And then you go and talk to that person. And they say to you, no, I still hate your guts. So then what's happened? Maybe you've made it worse because you've aggravated it. And in addition to making it worse, you've also lost credibility yourself. So it's not saying that you falsify things. The same principle that applies in speaking to your spouse, it applies in al-islah bayn al-nas. You still have to be careful about your credibility. You still have to be careful about not aggravating the situation. But within those constraints, it is possible to hide a little bit of what is evil. Let's just say that somebody, this is a common example, somebody was venting. You know, this person is so A, B, C, D, E. They don't intend to commit any harm. They don't have anything that they're going to do against you, but they've just vented. Then you come to me and ask, does that person talk bad about me? Now, if the person was talking bad about you and they were planning to harm you, then I have to be honest because I need to warn you and protect you. But if they were just venting, I know the only benefit for me to say yes is that it will pull you further apart. There's no harm if you don't know. It happens in our lives. So what is the right answer? The right answer is no. Don't worry about it. I haven't heard anything that worries me or anything that you're thinking of. So see, it's not about lying to make a fake kind of peace. It is not about lying even if it destroys your credibility. But it is about expressing things in a way that brings people together. So I wanted to give these examples because this is a common issue that we face in our communities, in our society, in our relationships. People have heard that there are certain times in Islam when it is allowed to tell a slight falsehood, but they don't understand how and where to use that principle. The summary is that in Islam, honesty is important, but there are certain values that are even more important than the strict truth. Don't lie, but if you need to bend or stretch the truth in order to accomplish those greater purposes, then that is good in Islam, and do so in a way that does not cause greater harm or that does not destroy your credibility. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to maintain that principle and that closeness in our relationships so that inshallah we are able to create a protective community that saves us from the harms of a non-religious and a materialistic society. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين صلوات. In the second khutbah, I begin by asking Allah for forgiveness for myself and all of us present and all mu'mineen and mu'minat throughout the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and guide us to do that which is pleasing to Him and to avoid all of those things that are displeasing to Him. This is the month of Rajab, it is the month of forgiveness, it is Friday, it is the day of forgiveness. It is our task to ask Allah for His forgiveness, to repent, and it is our prayer and our hope that Allah will answer our request, fulfill our prayer, and that He will grant us the forgiveness that we seek. Let us remember that one of the best ways to seek the forgiveness of Allah is to forgive those who have wronged us. And this is related to the topic of our khutbah. If I don't forgive anything that anybody does, then I should not expect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive me. And sometimes it's difficult. Some people, as I said, there's different personalities. Some people can let go of things easier. Some of us have a hard time because we remember. One of the effective ways for us to be able to let go is to just think about how many things Allah could hold us to account for if He wants to. And when I realize that maybe I think I'm a better friend to you than you are to me, but I can't say I am a better servant to Allah than He is a Lord to me. To remember that one relationship where regardless of what I might be for everybody else, I am always negligent, I am always underperforming. That makes it a little bit easier for me to forgive and forget with people who I think have wronged me. May Allah grant us forgiveness, and may we grant forgiveness to each other, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow us with His mercy and His grace. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلاة الجمعة. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا في الدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا النعماء والجود يا ذا المن والطول حرم شيبتي على النار اللهم اهدني من عندك وأفز علي من فضلك وانشر علي من رحمتك وأنزل علي من بركاتك إلهي هذه صلاتي صليتها لا لحاجة منك عليها ولا رغبة منك فيها إلا تعظيما وطاعة وإجابة لك إلى ما أمرتني به إلهي إن كان فيها خلل أو نقص من نيتها أو قيامها أو قراءتها وركوعها أو سجودها فلا تواخذني وتفضل علي بالقبول والغفران برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا من أرجوه لكل خير وآمنوا سخطه عند كل شر. يا من يعطي الكثير بالقليل. يا من يعطي من سأله. يا من يعطي من لم يسأله ومن لم يعرفه تحننا منه ورحمة. أعطني بمسألتي إياك جميع خير الدنيا وجميع خير الآخرة، واصرف عني بمسألتي إياك جميع شر الدنيا وشر الآخرة، فإنه غير منقوص ما أعطيت، وزدني من فضلك يا كريم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام، يا ذا النعماء والجود، يا ذا المن والطول. حرم شيبتي على النار. اللهم صل. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام على علي أمير المؤمنين. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي الشباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. السلام على الأئمة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا أهل بيت النبوة ورحمة الله وبركاته.